The November wind cut through Elena's thin coat like a knife. She pulled it tighter around her body, but it did nothing to stop the cold from seeping into her bones. Her stomach hadn't stopped aching for 3 days now. That hollow, gnawing feeling had become so constant that she almost didn't notice it anymore. Almost. She stood on the corner of a busy street in the heart of Vienna, watching people hurry past her. They all had somewhere to go. Warm homes, hot meals waiting, families. She had none of those things anymore. Elena's fingers were numb even though she'd wrapped them in the torn edges of her sleeves. These hands had once been her pride. Her grandmother used to kiss them and say they were blessed by the angels. Now they were just cold and dirty, with broken nails and cuts that wouldn't heal properly. She looked down at her shoes. The left one had a hole near the toe. She'd stuffed it with newspaper yesterday, but the rain had soaked through and turned it to mush. Her feet were wet and freezing. She wiggled her toes, trying to get some feeling back into them. How did it come to this? 6 months ago, she'd been a student. Not rich, but managing. She had a small room near the conservatory. She had her music. She had hope. Then the call came in the middle of the night. Her mother's voice breaking apart. The bombing. Her father gone. Her younger brother in the hospital. The apartment destroyed. Everything gone in a single night. Elena had tried to go back home, but there was no home to return to. Her mother and brother had fled to relatives in another country. They begged her to stay where she was, to finish her studies, to build a life. But without money, without papers being processed, without the scholarship that had been tied to a program that no longer existed, she'd fallen through the cracks. One missed payment, then another, then the eviction notice. She'd thought she could find work quickly. But who hires someone with no work permit? Who takes a chance on a foreign girl with limited language skills? She'd tried everything. Cleaning jobs, kitchen work, anything. But they all wanted papers she didn't have. Doors kept closing in her face. The shelter beds filled up fast every night, and she wasn't quick enough most evenings. So she'd learned to sleep in doorways, in train stations until security chased her away. In parks when the weather wasn't too bad. She'd learned which bakeries threw out yesterday's bread in the evening. She'd learned to avoid certain streets at night. She'd learned how to make herself invisible. But tonight she couldn't be invisible anymore. She was too hungry, too tired, too cold. Her eyes fixed on a restaurant across the street. It wasn't the fanciest place she'd seen, but it was nice. Warm light glowed through tall windows. She could see people inside laughing and talking. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread drifted out every time the door opened. Her mouth watered so intensely it hurt. But it wasn't the food that really caught her attention. It was the piano. Through the window in the corner of the dining room, she could see it. A beautiful grand piano, its black surface gleaming under the soft lights. Nobody was playing it. It just sat there, probably just decoration for the wealthy people who came here to eat. Elena's heart started beating faster. She knew that instrument. She knew every key, every possibility it held. She'd spent 15 years of her life devoted to pianos like that one. Her grandmother had started teaching her when she was 4 years old. By 7, she was performing in competitions. By 15, she'd won scholarships. By 20, she was studying at the conservatory, preparing for a career as a concert pianist. All of that felt like a different lifetime now. She hadn't touched a real piano in months. Her fingers ached for it in a way that was different from hunger, different from cold. It was a deeper ache, one that lived in her soul. An idea formed in her mind, crazy, probably stupid. They'd definitely say no. They might even call the police. But what did she have to lose? She waited for a break in the traffic and crossed the street. Each step felt heavy. Her pride, what little remained of it, weighed her down. But her hunger pushed her forward. At the entrance, she paused. Through the glass door, she could see the maitre d' in his crisp uniform. Beyond him, the diners in their expensive clothes. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass and barely recognized herself. Her hair was tangled and dirty. Her face was thinner than it had ever been, her cheekbones sharp. Her coat was stained and torn. She looked exactly like what she was, homeless, desperate, and defeated. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. The warmth hit her first when she opened it. Then the smell of food so overwhelming she felt dizzy. Then all the eyes turning toward her. The maitre d' moved toward her immediately, his expression shifting from professional politeness to alarm. People at the nearest table stopped their conversations. She heard someone whisper something in German. She didn't catch the words, but she understood the tone. "Miss, I'm sorry, but you cannot be here," the maitre d' said in English, probably noticing her foreign features. "Please," Elena said. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. "Please, I just want to ask something." "You need to leave," he said, firmer now. He was already gesturing toward the door. "Wait," she said, louder this time. More heads turned. The entire restaurant seemed to be watching now. Heat rushed to her face. Shame burned in her chest. But she'd come this far. "I can play." "The piano." "I can play it." The maitre d' looked confused. Behind him she heard someone laugh. A woman in pearls whispered something to her companion and they both chuckled. "Please," Elena continued, her words coming faster now. "May I play for a piece of food?" "Just one song." "I'm very hungry and I can play very well, please." The laughter grew louder. More people were openly staring now, some with pity, most with discomfort or disdain. She saw a man shake his head and return to his steak. She saw a couple exchange glances that clearly said how sad without any real feeling behind it. "Miss, this is not that kind of establishment," the maitre d' said. He put his hand on her elbow, trying to guide her toward the door. "I studied at the conservatory," she said desperately, "in Moscow. I'm a real pianist. I just need food, please, just one song." "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now or I'll call the police," he said. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. This was it. She'd humiliated herself for nothing. She'd broken the last piece of her dignity and it hadn't even worked. But then a voice cut through the murmurs. "Let her play." Everyone turned toward the sound. A man in an expensive suit stood up from his table. He had a young girl with him, maybe 10 years old, with wide, curious eyes. "Papa," the girl said. The man looked at Elena, then at the piano, then back at his daughter. He sighed heavily. "One song," he said, looking at the maitre d'. "If she can actually play, give her a meal. If she can't," he shrugged. "Then we'll know she's just another con artist and we call the police." The room erupted in whispers. Some people seemed entertained by the spectacle. Others looked annoyed that their dinner was being interrupted. The maitre d' looked uncertain, but his boss had spoken. "Fine," he said stiffly. "One song. Then you leave." Elena's legs felt weak as she walked toward the piano. Every eye in the restaurant followed her. She heard more laughter, more whispers. Someone said something about street performers these days. Another person worried she might have diseases. She reached the piano bench and stood before it for a moment. Her hands were shaking. Her vision was blurry from hunger and tears. This was the most humiliating moment of her life. These people didn't believe in her. They were just waiting to see her fail so they could return to their meals and forget she existed. She sat down slowly. The bench was exactly the right height. Her feet found the pedals like old friends. She let her fingers hover over the keys, not touching them yet. And then she closed her eyes and remembered who she used to be. Elena's fingers hovered above the keys, trembling. Behind her, she could hear the impatient shuffle of chairs, the clink of silverware against plates. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed quietly. They were waiting for her to fail. She took a slow breath and let her mind drift away from this restaurant, away from these people, away from the cold and hunger and shame. She went back to her grandmother's small apartment that always smelled like tea and old books, back to the upright piano that sat against the wall, its keys yellowed with age but still perfectly tuned. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "When you play, little dove, you must forget everything else. The music is not in your fingers. It is in your heart. Let it flow." Elena opened her eyes and looked down at the keys, black and white, simple, honest. They didn't care if she was homeless or hungry. They didn't judge her torn coat or dirty hair. They only cared if she could bring them to life. She lowered her hands and touched the keys softly, testing them. The piano was beautifully maintained. The touch was perfect. For a brief moment, she felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost broke her. Then she began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the air. Soft at first, gentle, like a question being asked, her fingers moved across the keys with a sureness that surprised even her. It had been so long, but her hands remembered. They remembered everything. Behind her, the mockery didn't stop immediately. She heard someone say, "Well, at least she can play a bit." Another person whispered, Probably learned from YouTube. But Elena didn't hear them anymore. She was somewhere else entirely. The music built slowly, carefully. Each note was a memory. Her first recital at age 6. Wearing a white dress her mother had sewn by hand. Her grandmother crying in the front row. The competitions she'd won. The scholarships. The acceptance letter from the conservatory. The dreams of concert halls and standing ovations. Then the music shifted, and so did her memories. The phone call in the night. Her mother's screams. The frantic packing. The goodbyes that felt like death. The shelter applications that led nowhere. The park benches. The hunger, the cold. The doors that closed. The people who looked through her like she was invisible. All of it poured through her fingers into the piano. Every loss. Every fear. Every moment of desperation. But also every moment of beauty she'd ever known. Every sunset she'd watched from her grandmother's window. Every time someone had shown her kindness. Every reason she'd kept going when it would have been easier to give up. The restaurant had gone completely silent. People had stopped eating. Forks were suspended in midair. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen staff had come to the doorway to listen. The man who'd agreed to let her play had forgotten about his dinner entirely. His daughter was staring at Elena with her mouth slightly open, completely mesmerized. The maitre d', who had been ready to throw her out minutes ago, stood frozen near the entrance. His professional mask had slipped. He was just a person now, listening. Elena's fingers raced across the keys. The music swelled and crashed like ocean waves. She leaned into it, her whole body moving with the rhythm. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She couldn't stop, not now. This wasn't just a performance anymore. This was everything she had left. Every piece of herself that hadn't been broken by the world. The piano sang under her touch. It was alive now, telling a story that words could never capture, a story of loss and survival, of dignity held onto by fingernails, of a soul that refused to die even when everything else had been stripped away. The woman in pearls who had laughed earlier now had tears running down her carefully made-up face. The businessman who'd called it a con had set down his wine glass with shaking hands. An older couple near the window were holding each other, both crying openly. Elena reached the crescendo. This was the part her grandmother had always said separated good pianists from great ones. The part where you had to open yourself completely, hold nothing back, risk everything. She'd played it hundreds of times before, but never like this. Never with this much need, this much truth. Her fingers flew across the keys in a cascade of notes that seemed impossible for human hands to create. The sound filled every corner of the restaurant, vibrated in every glass, resonated in every chest. It wasn't just music anymore. It was a prayer, a scream, a declaration that she was still here, still alive, still capable of creating beauty even while drowning in darkness. And then slowly, gently, she brought it back down. The storm passed. The notes became softer, more tender, like a lullaby, like forgiveness, like hope she didn't quite believe in yet but wanted desperately to find. The final notes hung in the air, delicate as spider silk. Elena lifted her hands from the keys and let them fall into her lap. She was shaking all over now, exhausted, empty. She'd given everything she had to that piano, and she had nothing left. The silence that followed was absolute. She sat there, unable to turn around, unable to face whatever was coming next. Maybe they'd call the police anyway. Maybe they'd still throw her out. Maybe this had all been for nothing. She'd humiliated herself, broken down in front of strangers, exposed every raw wound in her soul, and for what? A sandwich? Then she heard it. A single pair of hands clapping, then another, and another. The sound built like a wave. Suddenly, the entire restaurant was applauding. Not polite, obligatory applause. Real applause. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, when you've witnessed something that changes you. People were standing up from their tables. The woman in pearls was clapping with tears still streaming down her face. The businessman was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. The little girl was jumping up and down, her face glowing with joy. Even the kitchen staff were applauding from the doorway. Elena slowly turned around on the bench. She couldn't quite process what she was seeing. These were the same people who'd laughed at her minutes ago. The same people who'd looked at her with disgust. Now they were looking at her like she was something precious, something worth seeing. The man who'd given permission for her to play was walking toward her. His face had completely changed. The cynicism was gone. He looked stunned, humbled even. That was... He started, then stopped. He seemed unable to find words. He cleared his throat and tried again. That was extraordinary. I've never... Where did you study? How is it possible that you're... He couldn't finish the sentence, but she understood what he was asking. How is it possible that someone who can play like that is begging for food? Moscow Conservatory, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. Before everything fell apart. He shook his head in disbelief. You should be playing in concert halls, not... He gestured helplessly around the restaurant. I should be a lot of things, Elena said, and despite everything, she almost smiled. But right now I'm just very hungry. The words seemed to snap everyone back to reality. The man turned to the maitre d'. Bring her anything she wants from the kitchen, everything, and call chef out here. Everyone needs to meet her. But before the maitre d' could move, an elderly man stood up from a corner table. He'd been so quiet during the performance that Elena hadn't noticed him. He was distinguished-looking, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He walked toward her slowly, leaning on a cane. When he reached her, he did something unexpected. He took her dirty, trembling hand in both of his and brought it to his lips, kissing it gently. My dear child, he said in Russian, his voice thick with emotion. Do you know who I am? Elena looked at his face more carefully. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. She shook her head. Professor Anton Weiss, he said. I conducted the Moscow Philharmonic 20 years ago. I taught at the conservatory before I retired. And if I'm not mistaken, you are Elena Volkov, Vladimir Volkov's daughter. I heard you play when you were just a girl. You won the Tchaikovsky Youth Competition when you were 16. Elena's eyes went wide. She remembered that competition. She remembered winning. She remembered thinking her whole future was laid out before her like a golden road. You remember me? She whispered. Remember you? The old professor's eyes were wet with tears. My dear, you were unforgettable. We all said you would be one of the greats someday. And now... He looked around the restaurant, at her torn clothes, at the reality of what had happened to her. His face crumpled with sorrow and rage at the unfairness of the world. Now look what life has done to you. He turned to face the restaurant, still holding her hand. His voice rang out clear and strong, carrying the authority of someone used to commanding attention. This young woman is not a street performer. She is not a beggar. She is one of the finest pianists of her generation. And if you have any decency, any humanity at all, you will help me make sure she never has to ask for food again. The restaurant erupted, not just in applause this time, but in action. What happened next would stay with Elena for the rest of her life. The restaurant transformed into something she'd never seen before. People weren't just clapping anymore. They were moving, acting. Within seconds, it seemed like everyone wanted to help. A woman in a burgundy dress rushed to Elena's side with her coat. Here, take this. You're shivering. She draped the expensive wool coat around Elena's shoulders before she could protest. The businessman who'd watched her performance with tears in his eyes pulled out his wallet. This is for you, he said, pressing a thick stack of bills into her hands. Please, take it. I can't, Elena started, but more people were coming forward now. A younger couple approached, the woman holding her phone. I recorded part of your performance, she said quickly. I hope that's okay. My sister works at the Vienna Concert Hall. Can I send this to her? She needs to hear you play. The man who'd allowed Elena to play in the first place knelt down beside his daughter. He whispered something to her, and the little girl nodded enthusiastically. Then he stood and faced Elena. My name is Thomas. This is my daughter, Christina. We want to help. We have a guest house behind our home. It's small, but it's warm and it's empty. You can stay there. No payment, just please let us do this. Elena's mind couldn't keep up. This was too much, too fast. An hour ago, she'd been standing in the cold, wondering if she'd survive the night. Now people were offering her money, clothes, housing, opportunities. It felt like a dream. Like any moment she'd wake up on a park bench and find none of this was real. I don't understand, she whispered. Her voice broke. Why are you all being so kind? Professor Weiss squeezed her hand gently. Because you reminded us of something we'd forgotten, my dear. You reminded us that beauty still exists, that dignity can survive anything, that there are people worth saving. He paused, his own voice thick with emotion. And because we're ashamed. We should have seen you. Really seen you. Not just a homeless girl, but a human being with a gift that could move hearts. The maitre d' who'd tried to throw her out appeared at her side. His face was red and he couldn't quite meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so deeply sorry. I judged you. I was cruel. Please forgive me." He gestured toward the kitchen. "The chef has prepared a meal for you. Whatever you want. And please take your time." Elena tried to speak, but tears were flowing too freely now. She'd held herself together through months of hardship, but kindness was breaking her apart in ways that suffering never had. Her shoulders shook with sobs she couldn't control. Christina, the little girl, came and wrapped her arms around Elena's waist. "Don't cry," she said softly. "You're safe now. My papa will take care of you. He's really good at taking care of people." That simple gesture from a child undid Elena completely. She bent down and hugged the girl back, crying into her hair. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Thomas put his hand on Elena's shoulder. "Come, let's get you some food. Then we can figure out everything else." The next hour felt surreal. Elena sat at a proper table for the first time in months. The chef himself brought out dish after dish. Warm soup that made her stomach almost hurt because she'd gone so long without real food. Fresh bread with butter. Roasted chicken with vegetables. A salad with ingredients she didn't even recognize. Dessert that tasted like heaven. She tried to eat slowly, but her body was desperate. She hadn't realized how close to the edge she'd been. How much her body had been running on empty. The warmth of the food spreading through her felt like life flowing back into dead limbs. Professor Weiss sat across from her, watching with grandfatherly concern. "Slowly, dear one. Your stomach needs time to adjust." He sipped his tea and smiled. "Tell me what happened. How did Vladimir's daughter end up on the streets of Vienna?" Between bites, Elena told him everything. The war, her father's death. Her family scattered. The scholarship that vanished. The bureaucratic nightmare of trying to stay legally without support. The job she couldn't get. The slow descent from student to homeless in a matter of months. The professor listened with growing horror and sadness. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "I'm making some calls," he said. "I still know people. Important people. We're going to fix this." Around them, other restaurant patrons were having their own conversations. The woman who'd given Elena her coat was talking to Thomas about setting up a fund. The businessman was on his phone with someone, speaking rapidly about emergency housing assistance. The young couple who'd recorded the performance were showing it to others, and Elena heard gasps of amazement. "It's already getting shared," the young woman said, coming over to show Elena her phone. "Look, my sister posted it on social media. It's got 5,000 views already." Elena looked at the screen. There she was, playing the piano, her face streaked with tears. The caption read, "Homeless pianist plays for food and brings entire restaurant to tears. This is Elena Volkov from Moscow Conservatory. She deserves the world. Please share." "I hope that's okay," the woman said anxiously. "I wanted people to know your story. Is that all right?" Elena nodded, not quite understanding what it meant. She'd never been on social media much. She didn't know how these things worked. But if it meant more people might help her, then maybe it was good. Christina came back with her mother, a kind-faced woman with warm eyes. "I'm Diana," she said. "Thomas told me what happened. We'd be honored if you'd stay with us. Our guest house has a bed, a bathroom, heating. It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need." "I can help too," the woman in the burgundy dress added. She'd been listening nearby. "I own a boutique. You need clothes. Proper clothes. Come by tomorrow and I'll make sure you have everything. Don't worry about the cost." A tall man in glasses approached. "I'm a lawyer," he said. "I specialize in immigration and asylum cases. I'd like to offer my services, no charge. We'll get your paperwork sorted out." Elena looked around at all these faces, strangers who'd been laughing at her an hour ago. Now they were fighting to help her. It was overwhelming, humbling. She'd spent so long being invisible, being nothing, that being seen this way felt almost painful. "Why?" she asked again. "Why are you all doing this?" Professor Weiss answered. "Because you gave us a gift tonight. You played with such honesty, such raw emotion that you broke through all our walls. You made us feel, really feel. In a world that's so often cold and disconnected, you reminded us what it means to be human." He reached across and took her hand. "And because talent like yours is rare, sacred even, The world needs your music. We can't let it be silenced by circumstance. Thomas nodded. My daughter said something to me while you were playing. She said, "Oh, Papa, that lady is so sad, but her music is so beautiful. We have to help her." And she was right. Out of the mouths of children, as they say. Christina beamed proudly. The young woman with the phone came rushing back. "Oh my God," she said, her eyes wide. "Look, the video has 50,000 views now. And it's still climbing. People are commenting from all over the world. They want to know how they can help." She showed Elena the screen again. The comments were flooding in faster than Elena could read them. Messages in German, English, Russian, Spanish, French. People were tagging musicians, tagging news outlets, tagging concert halls. Some were offering money. Others were demanding that someone give her a proper audition. The anger in some comments surprised her. People furious that someone with such talent had been left to starve on the streets. "This is going to change everything," the young woman said. "By tomorrow, everyone will know your name." Elena felt dizzy. She'd finished eating, and her stomach felt uncomfortably full after so long being empty. The warmth of the restaurant, the kindness of these people, the sudden attention, it was too much to process. She felt like she might faint. Diana noticed immediately. "You're exhausted," she said gently. "Thomas, we should take her home." "She needs rest." Professor Weiss stood up. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said to Elena. "We have much to discuss. I've already spoken to some colleagues. There are people who want to hear you play, properly, on a real stage." He smiled. "Your life is about to change, my dear. Are you ready for that?" Elena didn't know how to answer. She'd been surviving hour by hour for so long that thinking about the future felt impossible. But looking around at these people, at their kind faces and their determination to help, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. It was fragile and tentative, like a candle flame in the wind, but it was there. "I think so," she whispered. Thomas helped her to her feet. Diana wrapped another coat around her, this one even warmer than the first. Christina took her hand and held it tight. As they walked toward the door, the entire restaurant began clapping again. Not the thunderous applause from before, but something softer, more reverent, like a blessing. The maitre d' opened the door for them, and this time his bow was deep and respectful. "Come back any time," he said. "You'll always have a place here." Elena stepped out into the November night. The cold was still there, the wind still sharp. But now she had a warm coat, a full stomach, a place to sleep, and people who believed in her. As Thomas's car pulled away from the restaurant, Elena looked back through the window. She could see people inside still talking, still looking at their phones, still sharing her story. She'd walked into that restaurant thinking she was asking for a piece of food. She was leaving with so much more. The question was, what would she do with this second chance? Elena woke up to sunlight streaming through clean windows. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was soft. The blankets were warm. The room smelled like lavender instead of garbage and desperation. Then it all came rushing back. The restaurant. The piano. The people. Thomas and his family taking her in. She sat up slowly, half expecting it all to have been a dream. But no, this was real. She was in the guest house behind Thomas's home. There was a small bathroom attached to the bedroom. Real running water. Hot water. She'd taken a shower last night that lasted almost an hour, washing away months of grime and shame. Her old clothes were folded on a chair. Diana had promised to take her shopping today for new ones. On the nightstand was a plate with bread, cheese, and fruit. A note beside it read, "Didn't want to wake you. Eat when you're ready. Come to the main house for breakfast. Christina is excited to see you. Diana." Elena picked up the bread and bit into it. Fresh. Soft. Real. She almost cried again. A knock on the door made her jump. "Elena?" It was Thomas's voice. "Are you awake? There's someone here to see you." Actually, several people. She quickly dressed in the cleanest clothes she had and opened the door. Thomas stood there with an odd expression on his face. Excited but also slightly overwhelmed. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong," he said. "Everything's right. Maybe too right. Come see." She followed him to the main house. As they approached, she could hear voices inside. A lot of voices. When Thomas opened the door, Elena stopped in her tracks. The living room was full of people. Professor Weiss was there, looking energized despite his age. Diana was serving coffee. Christina was sitting on the floor watching everything with wide eyes. But there were others too. Strangers in professional clothes. Someone with a camera, someone with a laptop open, showing them something on the screen. "What's happening?" Elena whispered. Professor Weiss saw her and his face lit up. "Ah, there she is. Elena, my dear, come in. You're not going to believe what's happened." The young woman from the restaurant was there too, the one who'd recorded the video. She rushed over to Elena, practically bouncing with excitement. "It's exploded," she said. "The video? It's everywhere. Over 5 million views now. Major news outlets have picked it up. People from around the world are talking about you." Elena felt lightheaded. 5 million? Look. The woman pulled out her phone and started scrolling. News articles in German, English, French. Headlines that made Elena's head spin. Homeless pianist's performance moves restaurant to tears. From streets to stardom, the story of Elena Volkov. Viral video proves genius has no address. "It gets better," Professor Weiss said, guiding her to the couch. "Sit down. You'll want to be sitting for this." A professional-looking woman in a sleek suit stepped forward. "Ms. Volkov, my name is Katerina Hoffman. I'm the director of programming at the Vienna Philharmonic Hall. We would like to offer you an opportunity to perform. A full recital. We're thinking next month, if that works for you." Elena's mouth fell open. "The Philharmonic. We've also been contacted by 3 different conservatories," Professor Weiss added. "They want to offer you scholarships. Full scholarships. Housing included. You could complete your degree." A man with graying hair and kind eyes spoke up. "I'm Dr. Heinrich Müller. I teach at the Vienna Conservatory. I've already spoken with the admissions office. They're willing to expedite your application. We'd be honored to have you as a student. And there's more," Thomas added. He was grinning now. "Show her the donation page." The young woman turned her laptop screen toward Elena. It showed a crowdfunding page with Elena's picture from the video. The title read, "Help Elena Volkov rebuild her life." Below it was a number that didn't make sense. Elena read it 3 times before it registered. That's 40,000 euros, she whispered. 42,000 now, the woman corrected, refreshing the page. It's still going up. People from all over the world are contributing. Some are sending 5 euros, some are sending hundreds. There's a comment section. You should read some of them. Elena scrolled through the comments, her vision blurring with tears. Messages in dozens of languages, all saying similar things. "Your music touched my soul. You deserve every good thing. Thank you for reminding us that beauty exists even in darkness. My grandmother was a pianist. This made me think of her. Here's what I can give." "This can't be real," Elena said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's real," Professor Weiss said gently. "Your story resonated with people. But it's not just sympathy, my dear. It's recognition. People heard your talent. They understand that what you did wasn't just playing notes. It was art. Real art. The kind that changes people." Katerina, the Philharmonic director, sat down beside Elena. "I've been in this business for 25 years. I've heard thousands of performances. What you did in that restaurant, in your state of desperation and exhaustion, was more moving than most professional concerts I've attended. You have a gift, Miss Volkov, a rare one. And Vienna wants to give you the platform you deserve." "But I haven't practiced properly in months," Elena protested. "I don't have appropriate clothes for a concert. I don't have sheet music. We'll provide everything," Katerina interrupted gently. "Practice space, sheet music, a pianist's wardrobe. Whatever you need. This isn't charity, though it may feel like it. This is investment in art, in culture, in humanity's better nature." Diana brought Elena a cup of tea. "Drink this. You look pale." Elena took the cup with shaking hands. This was too much. Yesterday she was begging for food. Today people were offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of. The whiplash of it was making her dizzy. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "What if I can't do it? What if I fail? What if people are disappointed?" Professor Weiss leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Do you remember what you played last night?" "Of course." Rachmaninoff's "No," he interrupted. "I don't mean what piece. I mean how you played it. Do you remember how it felt?" Elena thought back. The cold, the hunger, the humiliation, and then the keys under her fingers. The music pouring out of her like blood from a wound. The feeling of being alive again, of being herself again, even if just for those few minutes. I remember, she said. That's all you need, the professor said. That honesty, that rawness. That's what moved everyone. Not technical perfection, though you have that too, but the humanity in your playing, the truth. Can you do that again? Could she? Elena didn't know. Last night she'd had nothing to lose. Now she had everything to lose. These people believed in her. They'd given her money, opportunities, hope. What if she let them down? Christina, who'd been quiet this whole time, suddenly got up and came to sit next to Elena. She took Elena's hand in both of hers, the way children do when they're being serious. You won't fail, the little girl said with absolute certainty. You're magic. I saw it, everyone saw it. You just have to remember that you're magic. Despite everything, Elena smiled. You think so? I know so, Christina said firmly. Then she added, and Papa says that when you're really good at something, sharing it with people is like giving them a present. And everyone likes presents. The room chuckled, but there was truth in the child's simple words. Elena had been so focused on her own struggle, her own survival, that she'd forgotten what music was supposed to be. A gift, a connection, a way of saying things that words couldn't express. Okay, Elena said, her voice stronger now. Okay, I'll do it. The recital. The conservatory. All of it, I'll try. The room erupted in smiles and applause. Katerina pulled out her tablet and started making notes. We'll need to discuss the program. What pieces do you want to perform? We should include the Rachmaninoff, obviously. People will want to hear it. But what else? For the next hour, they planned. Professor Weiss suggested pieces that would showcase her range. Dr. Miller discussed the conservatory program and what classes she'd need. The lawyer who'd offered his services yesterday arrived and began sorting out her legal status. Diana made more coffee and food, making sure Elena kept eating. Thomas pulled her aside at one point. Are you doing okay? This is a lot to process. I don't know, Elena admitted. Yesterday I thought my life was over. Today it feels like it's beginning again. I'm grateful. So grateful I don't have words for it. But I'm also terrified. That's normal, Thomas said. Christina was right, though. You are magic. We all saw it. And you know what? Even if you weren't, even if you were just an ordinary person who needed help, you'd still deserve kindness. You'd still deserve a chance. Never forget that. Your talent is extraordinary, but your humanity is what really matters. Those words settled something in Elena's chest. She'd spent so long being defined by what she'd lost, then by what she could do. But Thomas was reminding her of something more fundamental. She was a person. That was enough. Everything else was extra. By late afternoon, the crowd in Thomas's house had thinned. Plans were made. Appointments were set. Elena had a practice schedule, a legal consultation, a shopping trip with Diana, and in 1 month a performance at one of Europe's most prestigious venues. Professor Weiss was the last to leave. He hugged Elena goodbye and she felt his frail shoulders shake slightly. I'm sorry, he said. I'm an old fool getting emotional. But you've given me hope too, you know. Hope that talent still means something. That art still matters. That people still care about beauty in this ugly world. Thank you, Elena said, for recognizing me. For believing in me. For making all this possible. I did very little, he said. You did it all. You had the courage to walk into that restaurant. To sit at that piano. To play your truth. That's what changed everything. After he left, Elena stood in the guest house looking at herself in the mirror. The face looking back was still thin, still showed the marks of hardship. But something was different. There was light in her eyes again. Purpose. She had 1 month to prepare for the most important performance of her life. 1 month to prove that second chances were real. 1 month to show the world that hope could be found in the darkest places. She sat down on the bed and closed her eyes. And in her mind, she began to play. The month had passed like a dream and a nightmare mixed together. Elena had practiced 6 hours a day, sometimes more. Her fingers had remembered, but her body had needed time to rebuild strength. The first week, she could barely practice for an hour without exhaustion. The hunger had taken more from her than she'd realized. But slowly, day by day, she'd grown stronger. Now it was the night. The night that would determine everything. Elena stood in the dressing room of the Vienna Philharmonic Hall, staring at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was almost unrecognizable from the one who'd begged for food a month ago. Her hair was clean and styled. Her face had filled out. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She wore a deep blue concert gown that Diana had helped her choose, elegant and simple. But beneath all that, she was still Elena, still the girl who'd lost everything. Still carrying all those scars, even if they didn't show on the outside. Her hands were shaking. A soft knock on the door made her turn. Professor Weiss entered, leaning on his cane, his eyes warm with encouragement. "How are you feeling?" he asked, terrified, Elena admitted. "The hall seats 1,800 people. It's sold out. What if I freeze? What if I forget? What if I'm not as good as everyone thinks?" The professor sat down slowly in a chair by the mirror. "Let me tell you something. I've worked with the greatest pianists in the world. Horowitz, Argerich, Zimmerman. You know what they all had in common? Talent. Fear," he said. "Every single one of them was terrified before major performances. The ones who weren't scared? They were never truly great, because fear means you care. It means what you're doing matters to you." "This is different," Elena said. "Those people out there, they came because of the video. Because of the story. What if they're disappointed when they realize I'm just ordinary?" "You played Rachmaninoff while starving and homeless," Professor Weiss said flatly. "Nothing about you is ordinary. But even if you were, even if tonight you played adequately instead of brilliantly, you'd still be worthy of being here. You've earned this. Not because of one viral video. Because you survived. Because you kept your soul intact when the world tried to crush it." Another knock. Diana peeked in with Christina holding her hand. "Can we come in?" Elena nodded, grateful for the distraction. Christina ran over and hugged her around the waist. "You look like a princess," the little girl said, eyes wide with admiration. "Thank you for coming," Elena said, kneeling down to Christina's level. "It means everything to me." "We wouldn't miss it," Diana said. She handed Elena a small box. "This is from all of us. Thomas, Christina, and me. We wanted you to have something before you go on." Elena opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a piano. "So you remember," Christina said seriously. "Remember that night in Papa's restaurant when you were sad but made everyone happy with your music? That was when you became part of our family." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She'd been so focused on not crying before the performance, but this undid her. "I can't accept this. You've all done so much already." "You can and you will," Diana said firmly but kindly. "We love you, Elena. You're not alone anymore." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "It's time. They're ready for you." Elena stood up, her legs feeling weak. She clasped the bracelet around her wrist. The small piano charm caught the light. "Wait," Christina said. She reached up and straightened a strand of Elena's hair. "There. Now you're perfect. Go give everyone that present I told you about. The music present." Elena kissed the top of Christina's head, then followed the stage manager through the corridors of the concert hall. The walls were covered with photographs of legendary performers who'd played here. Her grandmother would have never believed it. Elena Volkov walking these same halls as the masters. She reached the side stage entrance and stopped. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see the audience. Every seat was full. People were still finding their places in the aisles. She recognized faces from the restaurant scattered throughout the crowd. The maitre d' was there sitting with the chef, the woman who'd given her the coat, the businessman, the couple who'd started the video. In the front row sat Professor Weiss, Thomas, Diana, and Christina. Christina gave her an enthusiastic wave. The stage manager whispered, "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Volkov." Elena took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and thunderous. People were already standing, and she hadn't played a single note yet. She felt exposed, under the bright lights, vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt since that night in the restaurant. But she walked to the piano, her head high, and bowed to the audience. The applause continued. She sat down at the bench and adjusted it slightly. The Steinway grand piano before her was magnificent. She touched the keys lightly, testing them. Perfect, as she knew they would be. The hall fell silent. 1,800 people holding their breath, waiting. Elena closed her eyes and let herself remember, not just the restaurant. Further back, her grandmother's apartment, the smell of tea, The afternoon light coming through the window, her grandmother's hands guiding hers on the keys when she was small. Music is a conversation with God, her grandmother used to say. When you play, you speak for those who have no voice. You feel for those who have forgotten how to feel. It's a sacred responsibility, little dove. Elena opened her eyes and began to play. She'd chosen to open with the same piece that had changed her life, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. But this time was different. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't starving. She wasn't begging. This time she was grateful. Every note carried that gratitude. For the second chance. For the people who'd seen her worth. For the daughter who'd convinced her father to let a homeless girl play. For the professor who'd recognized her. For the strangers who'd become family. For the millions of people around the world who'd sent money, messages, prayers. The music swelled and filled the concert hall. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and passion. She could feel the audience with her, breathing with her, moving through the emotional journey of the piece together. She played the struggle and the sorrow, the loss and the loneliness, but she also played the hope, the resilience, the stubborn refusal to let the world break her completely. And most importantly, she played the love, all the unexpected love that had found her in her darkest moment. When she reached the crescendo, tears were streaming down her face again, but she didn't care. This was real, this was honest. This was who she was. Broken and healed. Fallen and rising. Human. The final notes hung in the air like a prayer. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the entire hall exploded. The audience leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening, punctuated by shouts of "Brava!" Flowers were already being brought to the stage, but Elena barely noticed. She was looking at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, and thinking about how strange life was. How quickly everything could fall apart. How unexpectedly it could come back together. She looked at the front row. Christina was jumping up and down. Thomas had his arm around Diana, both of them clapping so hard. Professor Weiss was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, not even trying to hide his tears. Elena stood and bowed deeply. The applause grew louder. She bowed again and again, each time feeling more real, more present, more herself than she'd felt in years. She had 2 more pieces to play, but she knew the hardest part was over. She'd proven it to herself, that she was still the pianist her grandmother had believed in, that the months on the street hadn't stolen her gift, that she could still create beauty even after experiencing so much ugliness. The rest of the recital passed in a blur of music and emotion. She played Chopin, delicate and intricate. She played Liszt, powerful and demanding. And she closed with a piece by Tchaikovsky, her grandmother's favorite. When it was over, when the final applause had faded and she'd taken her last bow, Elena returned to the dressing room in a daze. She sat down in front of the mirror, still in her blue gown, and just breathed. The door opened and Professor Weiss entered with the entire group behind him. Thomas, Diana, Christina, and a few other faces from that first night. "You did it," Professor Weiss said simply. "You were magnificent." "I have a confession," Elena said, turning to face them. "I wasn't playing for the audience tonight. I mean, I was, but not entirely. I was playing for my grandmother. She died 3 years ago. She never got to see me on a stage like this. But I felt her there. I felt her pride." "She knows," Christina said with the certainty only children have. "I bet she was in the front row with us. We just couldn't see her." Elena smiled through new tears and pulled the little girl into a hug. That night, after all the congratulations and the photographs and the interviews, Elena returned to the guest house that had become her home. She sat on the bed, still wearing her concert gown, and pulled out her phone. The video from the restaurant had been viewed over 20 million times now, but tonight, there would be new videos, new headlines. Elena Volkov triumphs at Vienna Philharmonic. From homeless to concert hall, the remarkable return. But those headlines didn't matter as much as she'd thought they would. What mattered was the bracelet on her wrist, the family who'd chosen her, the professor who'd believed in her, the little girl who'd called her magic. What mattered was that she'd asked for a piece of food and received her life back instead. She changed out of the gown carefully and hung it up. Tomorrow she'd start classes at the conservatory. Next month she had 3 more concerts scheduled. A record label had reached out about a recording contract. There were opportunities everywhere now, but tonight she was just Elena, a girl who'd learned that the lowest points in life could lead to the highest peaks. That kindness existed even when the world felt cruel. That music could save you, but people had to choose to listen. She lay down in her warm bed in her safe room and smiled in the darkness. She'd survived. She'd endured. And now, finally, she was living again.